Welcome everyone to our second seminar. So tonight we have Cameron Baker, who's a student here at UQ, and he's also a member, and he's going to be talking to us about some research he's done as part of his undergraduate degree here at UQ. So take it away, Cameron.
Thanks for that, Bianca. So, good morning. That started well. Good evening, everybody. As Bianca said, my name's Cameron Baker, and last semester I was fortunate enough to complete an undergraduate research project under the supervision of Dr. Ross Dwyer and Professor Craig Franklin here at UQ. And I was lucky enough to get to examine two of the drivers potentially impacting movement in estuarine crocodiles. So, animal movement varies quite substantially through both space and time. You can have massive movements as seen in your migratory birds going tens of thousands of kilometres every single year, or you can just have a frog moving 2 centimetres into the shade. Massive variety of movement, and this is generally driven by two main drivers. You can have your external drivers, such as weather, predators, as well as competition from both within the species and from other species as well. Along with that, you can also have your internal drivers of animal movement. So physiological reasons such as maintaining homeostasis within the body, make sure you got the right salt content, right water content, as well as reproductive movements to make sure you keep species alive. Now, one of the most well-known drivers of animal movement is rainfall. Now, rainfall has quite a variety of impacts depending on what sort of animals you're looking at. Now, it can act as a cue for migrations, for foraging in elephants, as well as your different ungulates such as wildebeest, zebra right across Africa. It can also act as a reproductive cue, seen in frogs, as well as the Christmas Island red crabs. Along with acting as a cue for migration, it can also impact the home range size of animals, such as seen in sea snakes, and it can also increase the activity levels and dispersal, as you see in green anoles, as well as freshwater turtles, like what we have here in Australia. It's a variety of different impacts just from one environmental driver. Now, one of the more less well-known drivers of animal movement is barometric pressure. Now, what barometric pressure is, it is the pressure being exerted from the weight of the air in the atmosphere. And now this can change from minute by minute, hour by hour, throughout the day. And an important thing with barometric pressure is that these shifts are often tightly correlated with changes in weather patterns. So when you see decreases in barometric pressure, that's generally a really good sign that rain, storm, or some other shift in weather is coming your way. So as such, barometric pressure has two broad impacts on animal movement. The first of these is it can decrease or alter the normal movement patterns of animals in avoidance of severe weather. Now, migratory songbirds, like in America, when they sense distinct shifts in drops in barometric pressure, that's a cue for them to slow down their foraging activities, as well as timing. They use it to time their migrations to make sure they just don't fly into the middle of a really severe storm and get shot off some random direction. It also impacts sharks as well as sea snakes and sea kraits. Now, when you've got baby hatchling sharks and sea snakes and that, they like to live in nice, shallow bays, safe from all the big, large predators. When there are severe drops in pressure on the front of a massive hurricane or cyclone coming through, that triggers them to flee from these shallow water bays and safe zones into more deeper water so they can avoid any potentially severe, dangerous weather that's going to hit them. Now, the other impact that barometric pressure can have is it can act as a cue to increase your movement, cueing dispersals and foraging events. So it acts as a really good cue for the dispersal in lizards and arthropods, as well as increasing the foraging activity of small bats and other insectivorous animals. Now, understanding how these sort of environmental factors impact animal movement is quite important if we want to try and understand the spatial ecology and lives of animals, as well as for the management and successful conservation of species. Now, this is especially true for your large predators, which we want to try and work out when and where they're going to be, so we can try and educate and get people just to move away from them a bit. So probably easily the largest predator that we have here in Australia, probably about the most well known, is your estuarine crocodile, also known as your saltwater croc, Indo-Pacific croc, or more affectionately just known as salties. Now, what's special about these guys is that they are the largest living reptiles on the planet. Now, while they don't look too much from the surface, it's not until you get underwater with them that you actually see their true size. Now, estuarine crocodiles, they've been measured up to 6.2 meters in length, and that's ridiculously big animals, and they end up weighing well over 2,000 kilos at this point. And from personal experience, I can say they are quite impressive, as well as a little nerve-wracking to stand in front of a big 4-meter plus animal, especially when you've only got a couple little sticks there. Now, with a name such as the saltwater crocodile, they've come around to get some myths around their habits and that. So one of the most common is that you'll only find saltwater crocodiles in salt water. Well, that's not the case. It would make managing and keeping people away from the problem quite easily. Probably the best quote I know to dispel that myth is given by good old Russell Coy. So, as their name implies, saltwater crocodiles are found in salt water. But they're also found in fresh water, which is not what their name implies. It just goes to show they are not to be trusted, which is probably quite good advice to live around. Don't trust those big crocodiles sitting in the water just in front of you. Now, along with being the largest reptile in the world, they are also the most distributed crocodilian currently around. So you'll find estuarine crocs all the way from the eastern shore of India, right throughout Southeast Asia, and then right across the top end of Australia. So this sort of distribution was a little bit confusing for quite a while, because a lot of the older research based on mark recapture and just sighting crocodiles in small stretches of river and lakes, we came to the conclusion that crocodiles, they just don't do much. They're quite lazy animals. What we're actually now finding is, as we increase our methodologies and start to employ things such as GPS radio tracking, we're starting to find crocodiles are a lot more active than what we once thought. So this particular animal here, here's a 3.5 meter crocodile from the Wenlock River with the GPS tracker stuck on his back. So he was easily travelling 60 kilometres per day. Now that is an absolutely massive amount. You could go, I should still be moving. Don't ignore that. 60 kilometres a day, so that's easily from here to Gibraltar, if not further north. Magic presentations. Yeah. Okay. Within a year, he was travelling over 1,500 kilometres, as well as travelling 400 kilometres from the top there where he was first caught on the Wenlock River, right down the coast to where he's ended up there, chilling around in his new favourite waterhole by the looks of it. Now, while previous research has shown that crocodiles will utilise tidal and ocean currents to help facilitate this movement, we don't actually know why are they doing it. What's triggering these animals to go for such long trips down the coast for seemingly no reason? Now, understanding this is quite important, because crocodiles do pose a potential threat to humans throughout their range. Now, it's quite a common sign for anyone who's been up north near any sort of waterway or that. You often see this lovely yellow sign here warning you, hey, don't go in the water, there's some probably some pretty big crocodiles in there that could hurt you. While these signs are everywhere up north, you still get people not listening to it. So these particular fishermen are sitting on what's known as Carthill Crossing up in the Northern Territory. That is actually a well-known spot for quite large crocodiles, well over 4 metres, to just chill out, just on the other side there, waiting for fish to flow across that little overpass with mouth wide open, just waiting for that next bit of food. Now with such activities and that people do, unfortunately fatalities do occur. With the last actual death from a crocodile in Australia just from the end of May this year. Now while this is sad, it's even worse that this isn't a one-off occurrence. Since 2000 there have been 337 fatalities just by estuarine crocodiles alone in the world, with 15 of these being here in Australia. Now another worrying thing is that human-crocodile interactions, they're actually starting to show an increase, both here in Australia and in the world, as our population increases, as well as with crocodile populations now increasing back to what they were pre-culling seasons. We're starting to see a lot more interaction between people and crocodiles. Now sad as what these fatalities are when they do occur, it always ends up even worse for the crocodiles, because you always end up with them getting shot. The crocodile or the crocodiles in the area is suspected of doing the killing. Until that one is found, they will remove crocodiles, which isn't the nicest thing. As well as whenever fatalities do occur, it always raises this nice debate everyone likes of, should we start culling crocodiles again? Are their numbers getting too high that we have to worry? So this is where having an understanding of the movements of crocodiles, what's driving them and why are they moving to specific areas is important, so that we can feed this back into management and conservation to help mitigate any of these sort of potential interactions and problems that do occur. So the aim for my study was to examine how barometric pressure and rainfall influence the movement of estuarine crocodiles. Coming into this, I had two hypotheses for this project. The first was that crocodiles increase their movements with increased rainfall. Now this is coming off anecdotal evidence from crocodile farms, zoos, as well as just fishermen noticing crocodiles get more active, along with a recent study out of America on American crocodiles that found increased rainfall increased the movement. The second hypothesis that I had was that crocodiles also increase their movement with shifts in barometric pressure, specifically with drops in pressure signalling potential weather shifts coming along. And this was based off of a study on American alligators, where they found, doing surveys, they found just more alligators during periods where there was increased fluctuations in the pressure and decreases in barometric pressure. So to do this study, I utilised a 6-year plus data set that's been collected in collaboration with the Franklin Eco Lab here at University of Queensland, along with Australia Zoo. And Australia Zoo has been nice enough to make a video about what occurs up on the crocodile trips. So, enjoy. So, as I mentioned before, Australia Zoo, in collaboration with the Franklin Eco Lab here at UQ, every year since 2008, every August, they head up north to the Wenlock River, just north of Weipa, where they deploy 20 traps, both floating like what's pictured here, as well as just traps on the side of the bank, to try and catch as many crocodiles as they possibly can. Now, once they catch these crocodiles, then comes the fun part of you got to get the crocodile out of the trap and restrain. So they get some quite fun encounters, as you saw in the video. Now, once restrained, a GPS transmitter is attached to the back 4 nuchal scoots in the back of the neck of the crocodile, along with various measures taken of the crocodile, so we can get an idea of how big they are they male or female, any other measures that we need. Now, I don't have any photos of it, unfortunately, but they also implant small acoustic transmitters just under the left front leg to allow them to pick up where the crocodile is, both with GPS as well as with acoustic receivers deployed throughout the Wenlock River system. So they got a very good idea of where each and every individual crocodile that we have tagged and monitors is. So, once all that's fitted and attached to them, now comes the really interesting part. The crocodiles are removed and set back free in the wild, none worse for the wear. As you can see, sitting on the back of this crocodile here is the GPS transmitter, ready to send us data. Now, since this project started, 41 crocodiles have been tagged with GPS transmitters, with another 100 just with acoustic transmitters alone. Now, from the GPS transmitters, their position is recorded approximately every 12 hours, with these transmitters lasting about 3 to 15 months on average. Now, the really interesting part is that this data gets remotely uploaded to satellites, and here is some of the raw data that we get from these crocodile movements. So this is 6 crocodiles just from last year alone. So got JK, a little female here, really big 4.6 metre male in here, along with a couple 3.4, 3.6, 3.2 metre males just swimming around the place. Now, while that trip, handling crocodiles, putting those transmitters on and just being up there sounds really fun and exciting to do, I had the fun joy of only doing the analysis. So my entire 3 months of the project was spent staring at the wonderful computer screen with the program known as R. So once we got those raw detections, I then had to go through and filter that data to remove any erroneous detections that had come up, just any sort of errors that have occurred. Then I calculated the distance of following the river that the crocodiles moved per week, and then combining this with data from the Bureau of Meteorology on the rainfall and shifts in barometric pressure up there at Weipa, I then modelled to see how those environmental factors influencing crocodile movement. So one of the first things you do is you want to visualise and get an idea of what's going on. So on the y-axis here, we have the mean weekly distance from the mouth of the Wenlock River. Along the x, we've got time. So this nice red line here, it's showing the movements up and down the river of this 3.5 metre male. Now, when we put rainfall over it, so we've now got rainfall on this axis across the right-hand side, along with the blue line now showing you the weekly shifts in mean rainfall. As you can see, we've got some nice big spikes of rainfall, but we aren't actually seeing much movement on the crocodiles. However, when you come back here, we see increases in rainfall seeming to correlate with increases in movement. Along with this, if we now replace this rainfall with the mean weekly variation in pressure, we start to see a bit more of a tighter correlation between shifts in barometric pressure as well as with movements. So this is where I have to come in utilising linear mixed effect modelling to see, is this pattern that we're seeing just completely random? Is it anything important, or is this actually an influence on movement? So we got weekly distance travelled on the y-axis against total weekly rainfall on the x-axis here. And what I found after modelling is that rainfall does nothing. It does not impact crocodile movement at all, which was completely against that first hypothesis that I put forward. Now, went in and also modelled pressure, and luckily for me, pressure started to show something quite different. So we have the weekly distance travelled on the y-axis again, but the x-axis now is showing the weekly variation in barometric pressure. And what we find is there is a highly significant correlation between shifts in the variation of weekly pressure along with the distance travelled. Interestingly, with this as well, we also found that larger crocodiles are moving further with the same shifts in barometric pressure. So, also went through again, along this x-axis here, we now have the weekly minimum barometric pressure. We also found that this was, again, significant with crocodile movement. So as the weekly minimum pressure decreased, we found crocodile movement increasing again, as well as with larger crocodiles just moving further again. So we're finding a significant correlation consistently between two different measures of barometric pressure. Now, interestingly, with barometric pressure as well, we also found that sex plays a part with how far these crocodiles are moving, with male crocodiles moving further than what females are. So that was quite interestingly. The interesting thing is, this isn't the only finding we found. Also found, depending on the size and the status of the crocodile, we noted 3 distinct shifts in movement. So when we had your nomadic individuals, so these are 2.5 to 3.5 metre plus crocodiles, they don't have a set home range yet. They haven't been able to set themselves up for the nice territory to call their own, and they're just shifting right across the river system. So along the x-axis on the left, we have the mean weekly distance travelled from the mouth of the Wenlock River again, across time on the x-axis, with the weekly variation in barometric pressure on the right y-axis. And again, red line shows the crocodile's movement, while the blue line shows the variation in pressure. What we found is that increases in the variation of pressure triggered nomadic crocodiles to start doing large movements up and down the river system. When we then shifted over, and we're now looking at a territorial animal. So these are your 4 metre plus big adult male crocodiles that have set themselves up with a nice spot on the river, as well as your smaller adult females that have also again set themselves up a nice spot in the river near a male or two. So again, mean weekly distance along the y-axis, weekly variation in pressure across time, and again, red and blue. What we found is that territorial animals started to show a bit of a weird response. They were increasing their movements the same as what your nomadic individuals do, but they were restricting their movements as well in this period. So as the pressure increased, they actually started to shift their movements more towards the upstream sections of the river, tightening their movement. The exact reason, we don't know. We still need to look more into this of what's actually happening. Now this is what's showing what the males are doing. What we actually also found is a significant reaction from reproductive females. So all the axes are the exact same as what they were just before. Same as with the red line showing the nice movements of this 3.1 metre female, with blue line showing a variation in barometric pressure. What we found is that increases in barometric pressure actually were triggering these females to go and shift towards their nesting sites, which was quite an interesting finding, and this did correlate with previous studies completed in the Wenlock River and previous observed reproductive and breeding behaviours seen in crocodiles. So overall what we found is that rainfall does not have a significant impact on estuarine crocodile movement. However, this study is the first to find a significant impact from barometric pressure on the movements of any crocodilians. as well as indicating a potential role of barometric pressure in crocodile reproduction that has not been looked at before. Now, these findings are interesting just in themselves, but they're also interesting from a management point of view, because we are now able to have an idea of what's potentially impacting the movements of estuarine crocodiles, allowing us to potentially predict increased periods of danger for people and work out when crocodiles are on the move to try and better manage them. And this is also important from a public education point of view. If we're able to work out when crocodiles are going to be more active, we're able to then tell people to be more careful around these specific periods in time, increasing public safety, as well as hopefully mitigating some of that increased crocodile-human interactions. However, this study is really just the start of a much broader study that needs to take place. While we're showing that barometric pressure is an important variable, we still don't know what else might be influencing crocodile movements. So we need to look at a lot more environmental variables. And then we need to see what are the influence of these variables on crocodile reproduction. How do they actually influence the home range and activity of crocodiles within these specific ranges that they like to find? Also, how does this then go into your problem crocodiles? What influence are we having? Do you see more problem crocodiles with increased barometric pressure or not? As well as, do just more attacks happen? And on top of it all, some experimental manipulations will also help just give us a nice, decent overview of what's happening. So there's still quite a lot of research that needs to be done on this, which if you check back with me at the end of next year, I'll hopefully be able to give you a bit more of an idea of what's actually driving and causing these movements in crocodiles. So before I do actually finish up, I was also asked to tell everyone, UQ Herp Society is running a nice logo design competition if anyone's feeling quite artistic and would like to try and have their design as the society's logo. So do it. It's there. Thank you all for listening.
Does anyone have any questions for Cameron?
Might fall under future, or you might already know. Curiously, I know they have a large dietary range, but would any of the other effects also affect, like maybe bigger fish, maybe bigger prey they would go, maybe the pressures or the rainfall would drive them further out?
Yeah, that is something we've actually got to look at. Ross Dwyer in the lab, he has recently found that rainfall influences the movements of fish in the Wenlock River, which finding increased rainfall triggers fish to travel downstream. Not sure why. We need to try and work out how does that fully influence the fish, and then try and correlate that with crocodile activities too. So that's, again, in that future thing of how their prey also influence their movement. Still got a lot. We'll see.
Because they're territorial, how can they move into each other's territories and not, like, obviously that amount of movement they wouldn't be getting into one of larger crocodile's territories. Like, how does that work?
Well, that's actually interesting. The more research we're actually doing on estuarine crocodiles and crocodiles in general, we're actually finding they're not as territorial as what we thought. From that raw data, I saw countless times big 4.6, 4.3 metre individuals having overlapping territories all the time. All these smaller animals going in and out of the territories, as well as other previous studies also showing massive overlaps in big adult male territories. So they're not quite as full-on territorial as what we once thought. There's still a bit more work, but they're not anywhere near as territorial as what they're said to be. Yeah.
And what's actually to do if you encounter a crocodile? Just keep standing, running away?
Depends where and when you have noticed said crocodile is in front of you. So if you see down the river there's a crocodile, like 10 so meters away, just don't go near the water. They're going to be in there. If you are at the water and the crocodile is actually launching out at you, I do wish you good luck. There is research showing that if you are about 1.5 times the head or so back from the water, you generally have the reaction time to get backwards enough, but that varies between people. As well as it just pays to be clockwise when you are up north. So be careful around the water. Don't go to the same spot on the river or the creek multiple different times. Go in appropriate sized boats. Just be safe and be aware that just because someone says this little freshwater stretch of the river might be safe, there's never been a crocodile there. As you saw some of the movements these crocodiles are doing, it just takes one shift and they'll just come straight up through and you might not even see them until it's too late. So just be careful, don't trust too much water up north. And, yeah.
So, I'll do the more recent one while it's fresh. So you're saying that they're moving downstream during the heavy fresh?
The fish.
The fish, and were the crocs moving with them?
Crocodiles were actually doing the opposite, they were moving upstream.
So they're going up during the big wave?
Yes.
Oh,
But we're
well,
actually
there's be a lot of things being washed in. Like we've been up in Weepa, we've seen taipans cruising around the hay there because there's so much fresh. There's about a 2-meter lid on it that we're not getting any sea snakes at all. They're all out, offshore as well. Boxtoes are long gone.
Yeah.
But we've even got just green tree frogs just cruising like that perfectly fine. And you see displaced pigs. You see all kinds of things in the water that really don't want to be in the water.
Yeah.
So could they be coming up because of the abundance of washed-in prey, do you think?
It could be, we're not actually sure why they're doing it.
Things hitting the water anyway?
It could also be, but they were always moving with the barometric pressures. They were moving before the rainfall actually hit.
Yeah, getting in
the
position.
So
But they're moving upstream with the wet.
yes, so
Yeah.
they could have been in position for fooding. We're not actually quite sure because some majority went upstream. Some odd ones did go slightly downstream.
Oh, yeah.
But we also did notice with the reproductive females, majority of them went downstream as well.
Okay.
So
So
obviously,
the males are doing the more risky dispersal kind
Yes.
of behavior.
they
So that kind of fits in with the second question I had, that if I understood it correctly, the females moved a distance and then they stopped. So they seem to be taking up position. The question is, did they take up position before the males, or the males, like the tiger sharks at Rain Island, encircling the island waiting for the females? Now, did they move up and start doing their little zigzaggy up and down while the females came and got position after that?
we did find that males were a lot more active. They were
No,
going
the
up.
timing of it. Who was active first, the males or the females?
Trying to remember if the
So
more
I thought
data
it was the
was.
males on your graph, that they seem to be taking up position. Then the females moved upstream and just grabbed the best position based on whatever.
Yeah, so it probably depends on at what point the females are at. The reproductive females we found, they were doing movements what seemed to be towards their nesting sites.
And were they choosing those partially because of the presence of the dominant male?
Didn't seem to be. They
Okay.
didn't seem to be because they were going through multiple male territories, and even within their area, their normal territory is within generally a nice big male's territory as well. So
So
that
that's the prime habitat that one female would grab, and then the next one would get the best pickings, and
yeah.
pretty soon you're like Germany hitting Tongo because there's only one left.
Yeah, they just keep going down, or they keep going to the new
That's true.
nice spot they rather, because crocodiles, they're quite selective with where they nest. They don't like to nest on really steep areas. They like the more floodplainy areas where they can get out and find a nice wallow to create and sit near their eggs for a bit. But, yeah. Chilly one.
So, with the satellite tagging and the big boxes going on the back, as far as you're aware, were any of those ever ripped off or lost?
We know of at least one that's fallen off a 4.65 metre male that Ross and that did attempt to try and retrieve, but were not lucky enough. But I do know in other studies on Nile crocodiles in Africa, they actually found they put 6 GPS tags out on crocodiles. Within 2 weeks, all of them had fallen off. So it can be a little risky with it, and the methods they seem to be using up north seem to be holding on the tags quite well and keeping them very secure, because they are drilled through the nuchal scoops and attached with a stainless steel wire to keep them nice and solid on that spot. Yeah.
Your graph mostly showed from September to, I think it was November or sorry, January. Is that just because you had that, because that's monsoonal or heavy rainfall season? Is there anything else during the other time that would have?
That was just, they were the most obvious crocodiles showing the different behaviours. All of them are showing it just some to varying degrees. Those were the 3 most obvious and easiest to sort of say. But yes, that is the main activity season. During the more dry seasons, they slow down the activity. They don't do quite as much, so they're not quite as exciting to see draft.
As in they don't travel as much, or they just normally stick to it?
That's when they start to slow down. They don't do the massive movements that we see in the wet season.
Yep.
So this research, it was looking at data throughout the year, and I still find these correlations. It would actually probably be better to just focus in on the monsoonal season to get a much better idea of how these impacts happen, influence the crocodiles, without sort of the background noise of the dry season dampening the impacts.
Yep.
But that's still got to keep going and fine tuning everything.
Where the crocs are dispersing, do they move mostly during the day or the night?
I didn't actually look at that because I was combining their movements into weekly movements at a time.
Okay.
For the next year when I am doing more work on this, I do want to try and get to the finer daily activities to try and see, yes, when are they moving, why are they moving at night or during the day.
Yeah.
General crocodile behaviour probably suggests they're moving more at night, just because that's when they're more active and they feel more secure to move around.
Okay.
Yeah, my question is related because you're doing it bi-weekly, but obviously barometric pressure changes daily, if not hourly or by minute. So going into finer detail, would you think you would get more information that way, or do you think it might be too difficult?
It would be much better to do it. I would say I would get more information out of it. If we were to go approach more fine detail, we'd probably find that minimum barometric pressure doesn't have as much of an impact anymore. Because originally I was looking at both monthly and weekly aggregations of data, and we found with the monthly movements that every single variation of the drivers were all significant, so it wasn't telling us anything. So the more fine we get a much better idea. Yeah.
Do you have any idea what the actual physiological mechanism is that crocs are using to detect the barometric pressure?
No, I do hypothesize it might have to do with the pressure receptors lining the jaws of crocodilians that are highly receptive to shifts in pressures, and they might be feeling increased hydrostatic pressure from shifts in barometric pressure. It may also have something to do with the inner ear, as they are the closest relations to birds, where the inner ear seems to play an impact with birds picking up the shifts in pressure, so crocodilians might show the same impact. But that's where the experimental manipulations need to come in, that we actually work out how are they doing it. We're just finding that, yes, they do it. So, yeah.
They're moving upstream. Are they moving it based on mechanical detection of the current? Or can they detect changes in the salinity and pursue a lower saline area if they're trying to feed on flood?
We're not sure yet. That's what all of next year will be for me, is digging into any single shift that does happen in their environment of what might be triggering their movement. So it might be something as simple as shifts in temperature, might be something as complex as shifts in salinity in the river systems causing them to trigger movement. We just don't know yet. Still a big unknown with crocodile movement.
Is the actual tagging ongoing as well? Or
Yes, that's still ongoing. So they're up there right now catching as many crocodiles as they possibly can. And so next year I'll have a fresh set of increased data to add to the pile to analyse.
Just curiosity, like some with smaller animals, sometimes they go back to staying in traps and whatnot. Do you find that with crocodiles? Do you know of any that have been recaught or?
Yes, that's actually one of the major problems with capturing crocodiles, is that as soon as you release them, they just go straight back. So probably one of the most obvious studies is Campbell et al. 2010, off memory I think, where they actually translocated a crocodile from the Western Cape to the eastern side of the Cape. That crocodile stayed in the river that they translocated it to for about 3 to 4 months. Once the current actually shifted up the east coast and started travelling south to north, The crocodiles, that crocodile actually hopped on that current and went right around the top of the cape and then straight back to the Wenlock River within about 3 or so weeks. So it was a very planned, direct movement. So yeah, they always go back to where they are. That's why now when crocodiles are removed from river systems, they're actually just taken straight into captivity, either in a zoo or a crocodile farm. Because yeah, it just does not work.
Any more questions? No? All right, thanks very much.